Before you ever toss another coin into a drawer or let it vanish into your pocket change, you need to hear this story because between the years 1945 and 1949, the U.S. Mint was doing more than just striking coins. It was crafting economic tools. Of survival in the aftermath of World War II, coins that carried more than just face value. Coins that would go on to become some of the most valuable hidden treasures in American history. And when we fast forward to the Zachary Taylor presidential dollar, we see a completely different kind of coin born from honor, legacy, and a troubled rollout that confused collectors and historians alike. This is not just about coins, this is about America, its money, its metal, its legacy, and its leadership etched in copper, nickel, silver, and gold. So sit back, because what you're about to hear is a detailed and untold history so powerful and so deeply connected to America's past that by the end of this video, you'll never look at a pocketful of change the same way again. We begin in 1945. The Second World War had just ended. Soldiers were coming home. Cities were rebuilding. The world was shifting gears from wartime sacrifice to peacetime production. But in the United States, the machines didn't stop. They were striking coins, pennies, nickels, dimes, quarters, half-dollars each, holding within them the weight of a nation that had just survived the deadliest conflict in human history, 1945. Coins are some of the most historically meaningful coins in U.S. history. The Lincoln wheat penny of that year, for example, wasn't just made of copper. It was made of the very same metal that had been rationed just a few years earlier for wartime bullets and artillery. The 1945D Lincoln cent, struck at the Denver Mint, is a coin rich in character and significance. It may seem like an ordinary coin, but when you consider the fact that copper was one of the most heavily guarded resources during the war, its post-war return to coinage tells a larger story. These coins were signals, symbols of a nation trying to return to normalcy. And then you had the Jefferson nickels of the mid-40s, from 1942 to 1945. Nickels weren't even made of nickel. They were made of an alloy of silver, copper, and manganese. Why? Because nickel was needed for tanks. So the so-called war nickels became a unique and rare chapter in U.S. coin history. The 1945 P. Jefferson nickel, with its large mint mark above Monticello, was one of the last of the wartime silver nickels ever produced. These coins had a melt value greater than their face value and would become prized by collectors decades later. Move forward to 1946, and you see the reintroduction of traditional alloys. The Roosevelt dime debuted that year, honoring the late President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who had died just a year earlier. This wasn't just a new dime, it was a national tribute, the symbolism of putting FDR, the man who led the nation, through the Great Depression and World War II, onto a coin used in everyday transactions was a calculated and emotional decision. And these dimes were made of 90% silver, a stark contrast to today's copper-clad coins. In 1947 and 1948, coins remained largely the same in terms of composition, but something else changed demand. The U.S. economy was booming, and more coins were needed than ever. Mintages increased, particularly from the Denver and San Francisco mints. Coins from these years may not be rare in number, but their condition, strike quality, and mint marks all add up to massive differences in collector value today. A well-struck 1948 Tess Franklin half-dollar in mint state condition, for instance, can fetch hundreds or thousands depending on grade. By 1949, the world had changed again. The Cold War had begun. The United States was now positioning itself not only as a global power, but as a cultural and economic superpower. And that legacy continued to be struck into every coins that moved through grocery stores, bus stations, military bases, and banks. And then decades later, in 2009, the U.S. Mint released the Zachary Taylor presidential dollar as part of its ambitious but short-lived presidential $1 coin program. This series was meant to honor each U.S. president in the order of service, but there was controversy. The coins were not widely circulated. Many Americans never even saw them. And in the case of Zachary Taylor, there was a minting error that caused some 2009 coins to be struck with no-edge inscriptions. The motto, "In God We Trust," and "E Pluribus Unum" were missing, creating one of the most significant modern rarities in U.S. numismatic history. Zachary Taylor was the 12th President of the United States, a general and war hero, and his presidency was cut short by death. His coin, ironically, also saw limited life in circulation, but for collectors, it became a must-have piece. And if you happen to have a missing yedge-littering era coin of Zachary Taylor, you may be holding a four-figure piece of modern American coinage. So what ties 1945 through 1949 to the Zachary Taylor presidential dollar? It's this: every coin tells a story. Some tell stories of war and peace, others of presidents and politics. And all of them, whether struck in silver or clad in manganese-brass, hold a value far greater than face value. They hold the story of America. This is the story of valuable coins, not just as collectibles, but as artifacts, pieces of metal that pass through the hands of history and now rest in the collections of those who truly understand what they mean. So, when you hear the clink of a coin, don't just hear currency, hear history.